Attention New York City listeners, I'm excited to share two upcoming live This Is Taste tapings that I think you're going to like, taking place at Rizzoli Bookstore in Manhattan's Flatiron District. On April 8th, I will be joined by Barbara Costello, better known through her Brunch with Babs social accounts. We will be talking about her brand new cookbook, Cooking with Babs. And on May 5th, I will be joined by photographer and journalist Craig Maude for a reading and conversation about his debut memoir, Things Become Other Things. I love this book so much and welcome you all in to hear his story about walking around Japan and so much more. Tickets are available at the Rizzoli website, rizzolibookstore.com. I hope to see you there.
So when you enter into our lobby, it's magical all over, really. But when you go to our little landing area right by the staircase, we have all the furniture from the Queen's room from the set of The Crown.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Today in the show, we have a really fun episode. I recently headed out of the studio and visited Victoria, British Columbia to check out the food and drink scene and report back my findings. Now, listeners, Victoria is such an exciting place, and I'm thrilled to speak with Andrea Allridge, the chef at a really terrific new restaurant, Genevka. I also speak with Lori Joyce, the owner of Better Acres Ice Cream, and yes, it is so good. Victoria rests on the naturally stunning Vancouver Island and located a very short ride from Vancouver and Seattle. In Victoria, I found amazing coffee, fine dining, a historical botanical garden, and fresh seafood around every corner. Throughout the episode, Aliza and I catch up to talk about some of the highlights of my visit. I hope you enjoy my dive into Victoria. Andrea Allridge, welcome to This Is Taste. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm great because we're talking about your restaurant and Victoria, and I want to start and hear a little bit about Genevka and about the style there. I know it's really based around open fire cooking, but there's so much more going on than just an open hearth, and I mean, we'll talk about the squid dish, like tremendous. But tell me a little bit about the restaurant, like the style of and what you'd expect there.
Yeah, so at Genevka, we really wanted to make it something very warm and welcoming and obviously fire focused, but we wanted to kind of bring in an amalgamation of my entire history and background. So we aren't one set style of cuisine. It's definitely a kind of melting pot of a bit of my heritage, a little bit of the Moy family's heritage as well, being that Lenny Moy is the owner and comes from an Asian descent. Um, and I really wanted to kind of bring little notions of that in. But yeah, overall, the restaurant it's a vibe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tremendous vibe. I mean, you walk in and one of the servers told me that there's actual pieces of scenery and props from the show The Crown. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. So when you enter into our lobby, it's magical all over, really. But when you go to our little landing area right by the staircase, we have all the furniture from the Queen's room from the set of The Crown.
Wha- Okay, first, I mean, how does the production was in England, I believe, and how does it end up in Victoria? Like, what's the story of it, and what are these pieces?
So during the whole process of sourcing everything for Genevka, Lenny Moy, our owner, was very, very adamant on, staying tried and true to the British aesthetic. And he spent countless hours on auction sites. And I believe it was his wife, Jahan, who actually stumbled upon the set sale of The Crown. And that kind of spiraled into a whole other shopping spree. But yeah, no, it just fit the entire style, and we needed to have it.
Yeah, it's when you walk in, it's extremely warm and colorful in the dining room, and yeah, the meal at Genevka was honestly such a highlight of my year so far. I think you're
Oh
such
my
a
gosh.
incredible chef. No, I mean it, and I was impressed with really the technical skill and just the creativity there. And we'll get into your style of cooking, but for those of our listeners who don't know you, you grew up in a Jamaican Filipino family and started cooking professionally at 15. What drew you to the kitchen?
So for me and my family, food was kind of always the focal point for us. And with having a Jamaican father and a Filipino mom, it was definitely like a debate slash argument most days on what kind of style we would be eating. Um, and I think that's something that really resonated with me throughout my entire life. And really, it was my grandmothers who got me into cooking more than anything. And I think it was when I graduated high school is when it really resonated that I needed to follow my, dreams and seek out a culinary career path.
Yeah, and like 15 gets you into the professional kitchen. And what are you learning at 15 from that kitchen?
Honestly, everything. Like the second I walk into a kitchen, at least when I was 15, it was just full absorption. Like I was a complete sponge, just down to how people would come in and start their day, the attitude, the work ethic, and just every little aspect of it. I loved.
In your kitchen at home, I mean, are there other dishes that are flowing from your family that really stuck with you? Favorites at the home table.
Definitely. I would say my Lola's lumpia and her adobo, and especially her lengua, which is a braised beef tongue dish. That's something that I hold so near and dear, and one day I hope I can make it as good as she did.
Yeah, yeah. Really, that's a high bar though, right? That's a high bar.
It is. It's a very high bar, and so far I have not been able to do it, but I am going to keep trying.
In the kitchen, you're using the open flame, and how does that allow you to cook in this style that you call an amalgam that has many different inspirations, but with this central fixture of the hearth?
I mean, for me, my entire background has pretty much been cooking with fire, so I can't really live without it. And it is very archaic in that sense, where, just for me, making some of the best food comes from directly cooking over a fire. And in a lot of Filipino and Jamaican cuisine, it does resonate with that as well, along with Italian. So it was kind of a no brainer for us to bring that fire into the restaurant and really create or at least for me to create a menu that has aspects of the fire all throughout, whether it's directly over the fire or smoked or just kissed on the flames. We kind of brought all of that in.
Well, let's get into the squid dish because tremendous. I'm going to talk about it more in my highlights from Victoria, and I have some thoughts on it. But really, how did you take squid and really use the fire? Use this really, I would call it really creative way of butchering that you've done there. It's hard to explain. I mean, I had it on Graham, and I had a few people like, what is that? And it
Yeah.
looks amazing. And you got this charred jalapeno kind of salsa verde going on as the sauce. It's really, really, really cool, this dish.
Thank you. I mean, that's very kind of you. I overall, so many people think that we're doing so much to it, but this is kind of where my cooking style comes in, where it's the most simplistic approach. And you really are just letting the ingredients shine more than anything. For the squid, I mean, Humboldt squid on its own is naturally so beautiful and tender. And all we do is treat it exactly how it should be, where we clean it down, and it all comes down to the scoring. It's all about having very succinct micro cuts to score the squid down so that when it does kiss the fire on the grill, it just ever so slightly curls up with its muscle, and it just creates the most tender piece that you could ever bite into.
Yeah, so the scoring creates tenderness and this kiss of the flame. I mean, we were talking like seconds on the flame. I mean, it really was perfectly cooked. And again, your technical skills are quite sick. I'm really
Oh,
impressed. But like,
thank
take
you
us
so
through how you actually you cook this squid.
Yeah, it's literally less than a minute of just a quick sear and getting those nice charred marks on it for both sides. And then it gets curled up and plated, and out it goes.
Yeah, it's such a winner, and as I mentioned in the recap, there's fresh pastas, there's incredible salads. I thought that your approach to winter greens was really interesting, and I mean you really are showing the best of British Columbia, the produce and the products pulled from the waters and the ground. You tell us a little bit about being a chef in British Columbia. I think some of our listeners based in America maybe don't get out there or maybe spend time only in Vancouver, but getting onto Vancouver Island, I had such a great time. I just want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, BC overall is amazing. I am so lucky to be born here and so grateful for it. I mean, I have my times where I'm definitely jealous of Californian produce. But
That's everyone in America, by the way, who doesn't live in
yeah, yeah.
California.
They're just too lucky. But no, in BC, we do have such a beautiful terroir that really lends to some of the best ingredients in the world. And it's amazing what some of the purveyors and producers are doing out here and just how much dedication there is to it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, talk about the seafood in particular. I think that the fishing culture, I mean, you're obviously on the coast and you've got these pristine waters. We eat a lot of Canadian seafood in America too, but what are you getting out of the waters?
We're kind of taking everything and anything at this point. Oysters down to, some of our squids and even some of the fish and just mussels, especially. I know everybody talks about Salt Spring Island mussels, which don't get me wrong, absolutely love them. But we're currently using Salish mussels from Reed Island. We source them through Organic Ocean, and they're some of the best mussels I've honestly ever had in my life. And I only just started using them this year.
Yeah, what's the dish that you're using them in? What's the preparation?
So they are served with our ling cod, and it's kind of served in a bit of a nage, where we cook the mussels ever so slightly till they're nice and tender. And then we just use a little mix of seasonal root vegetables at the moment. And then that gets finished with some prawns as well. And then a little bit of fennel pollen and herb oil. And it's just super simple, but very light and clean and fresh. And it's a really good example of what BC does have to offer because everything in it is as local as can be.
For sure. I got that vibe like throughout all my visits to the restaurants. Lingcod appeared many, many times. And I was there in February, so I wasn't getting all the seafood, but I really
Yes.
love it. And let's talk about the farming because I think like a chef really thinks about local produce and maybe not now in the winter, but like when you're in summertime, full bloom, what are your favorite local produce to use?
Oh, that's a hard that's a hard question. Honestly, when it comes to the spring and the summer, I am taking everything and anything. And for me, tomato season is honestly one of the highlights out here. Yeah, it's so good and it's just so versatile. There's so many things you can do with it.
So, Andrea, you competed on Top Chef Canada and you made it to the finals. What's it like competing in this prestigious show and getting that far? What was that like?
Amazing. It's stressful. And yeah, it's quite daunting. I mean, when we filmed my season, it was during the pandemic. So I think that added a very heightened layer of stress for all of us um, in that season. And it was really great to find so much friendship amongst all of us though, where we really did kind of help each other and uplift each other, even though we were still competing. And I found some of my best friends. So
It's nice. You're still friends with some of them. That's good. You're not just competitors. I mean, what's the talent like in Canada? I mean, it's a silly question. I know, and for our Canadian listeners, I apologize. We don't cover Canada enough. For real, I'm being legit. Like, I mean, it's an incredible country with amazing natural resources, but also between Montreal and Toronto, Vancouver Island. I'm obviously forgetting places. There's such a real, like, I would say, culture that is mature. Talk about it. I want to get it from your point of view as a Canadian chef.
I mean, I think the talent pool throughout Canada is not spoken about enough. Absolutely. And it is astonishing to see how much creativity there is throughout this entire country. And I really wish it was highlighted even more than it already is, because there is so much credit that is so deserved everywhere here.
Yeah. When you travel throughout Canada and you leave BC, are there any cities or places or restaurants that you really love?
Definitely. I mean, I go to Toronto quite a bit because my sister lives out there, and Mimi Chinese is a huge, huge favorite of mine for sure.
Yeah, I know that name. One day I'll go there.
Yeah,
Uh,
you have to. I very highly recommend it. I think I've told at least like every other person I know to go there.
well, I want to close, and I want to get your take because I know this is a tough one. If I could get three restaurants, it could be coffee even in Victoria that you go to that you like going to when you have a very few amount of days off. Where are you going?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I mean, I haven't lived here quite long enough, so I'm very sorry to the rest of the island if I haven't visited as many places as I should. But definitely coffee wise, Saint Cecilia, hands down, some of the best coffee I've had in ages. Um, Ine Sushi and Sake Bar is so much fun, such a good vibe, and just amazing sakes to try every time I go. And last but not least, Marilena, of course.
Yeah, what's going on there?
It's just, the top table family. I, grew up in it, and that was a huge part of me kind of coming into cooking with fire. And I've got so much love and support for Top Table, and yeah, I got to represent.
I love it. Well, Andrea, it's been really fun catching up with you. And Genevica's the restaurant. You got to go there if you end up in Victoria. I love it. I loved it. And I can't wait to visit again.
I'm Nomi Fry.
I'm Vincent Cunningham.
I'm Alex Schwartz, and we are Critics at Large, a podcast from The New Yorker. Guys, what do we do on the show every week?
We look into the startling maw of our culture and try to figure something out.
That's right. We take something that's going on in the culture now. Maybe it's a movie, maybe it's a book, maybe it's just kind of a trend.
And we expand it across culture as kind of a pattern or a template.
Join us on Critics at Large from The New Yorker. New episodes drop every Thursday. Follow wherever you get your podcasts.
As the summer travel season approaches, I'm excited to let you know about two upcoming Taste Travels, our immersive travel series hosted by cookbook authors and me, Matt Rodbard. On June 15th, I will be joining the Mediterranean dish author Susie Karache in Barcelona for an incredible week of culinary tours, cooking classes, and plenty of wine and jamon. And on September 15th, I will be joining author and baker Mauricio Leo of The Perfect Loaf for a tour of northern Italy. We will visit artisanal Parmigiano Reggiano and balsamic vinegar producers, take a masterclass in the art of panettone, and of course, eat plenty of stuffed pasta and mortadella in and around Emilia-Romagna. Both trips are nearly sold out and closing soon. If interested, write into hello@tastecooking.com and we will get you the information. That's hello@tastecooking.com. I hope to see you on one of our taste travels this summer.
Hey, Matt, how are you doing?
I am great, Aliza. We just had a great conversation with Andrea Aldridge, and we're going to split our three things into two segments because I have so much to say about this visit to Victoria. So let me share some things.
Yeah, I'm taking notes as we chat because I have been wanting to go to Victoria. And I think after listening to the episode and talking with you about the trip, I want to go even more.
Well, first off, and we might have mentioned it on the interview, but Victoria is located a short 1.5 hour ferry ride from Vancouver and a 3 hour ferry ride from downtown Seattle. So you could potentially do day trips from either city or just spend overnight. I love this accessibility. It's really great that you can just visit when you're visiting Seattle or Vancouver, and just you're there in no time. Another important thing is that U.S. dollar is extremely strong in Canada. So strong. It's like 1.4 to the dollar right now. And I remember a time when I was growing up when we'd go to Toronto as a family, and it was like the Canadian dollar was stronger. So that's like how it's changed so dramatically. So it's like a 30 to 40% discount on a lot of things. And honestly, a great reason to go is it's cheaper than in other parts of the United States. Victoria is located right on the ocean. It's a city. It's like the center of Vancouver Island, and Vancouver Island is well known for its hiking and camping. It's a massive space, and in the spring, summer, and fall, it's just a tremendous place you can visit for natural beauty. I was able to visit so many restaurants. I want to go over a few, some non-food items. Are you ready to hear about it?
Yeah, I just have to say I love the fantasy of taking the ferry to get anywhere. It's such a beautiful way to travel, and I would imagine the views of just kind of going across the water is really special too. So that's what I'm picturing. I'm picturing you doing the Titanic pose on the end of the ferry as you set sail.
I was there in February, and I went outside on the deck, and I did a little Titanic moment, or at least took some photos. Stunning. Just going past, some of the islands are just inhabited by nature and animals, and some of them have very few residents, and it's just a stunning ride. It's so beautiful.
I want to hear about the restaurants, but first I'm wondering if it's I could see spring, summer, fall. That's probably when most people want to go and be outside and it's less cold. But you probably had a lot of luck just walking in and going to restaurants maybe because it wasn't as popular of a time of year. Did that happen?
Great point. Absolutely true. I think going off season anywhere that's a big tourist destination is great. And I had a little trouble getting into restaurants that are probably very crowded in August. There's a cruise ship terminal there, so there's definitely lots of people who are there for the day. And you can feel it when you walk the streets in February. You can see, wow, there's probably 1,000 people in this space, in the summer. But really, any time of year, Victoria as a city is great. And a high level thought is the food scene is really mature. There's really a great diversity, and I'm going to go over so many different styles of restaurant. But some of the fine dining was as good as you'd find in New York, LA, San Francisco. Just incredible talent. But because it's Canada, I think the U.S. press doesn't cover Canada that much. Best New Chefs in Food and Wine and Bon Appetit, they don't cover Canada. And of course, Canada has their own great, media institutions, and Top Chef Canada is quite big. Andrea was a finalist on the show, but I just wish more Americans would look at Canadian cuisine and cover it the way we cover the States.
Okay, so tell us where to go.
Well, first, I mean, it's hard to start because there's lots of different diversity of restaurants, but a place that really stood out was the Courtney Room. The chef is Brian Tesselin, and he is doing, I call it modern Pacific Northwest cooking. He has a great pedigree. He grew up in Vancouver and cooked at some fine dining restaurants there. And I really enjoyed the way he thinks about Pacific Northwest produce. He has, the list of the farmers on the menu, which I think is requisite in the States, but I didn't see it everywhere in Canada and Victoria. He did a shrimp toast with this local working culture sourdough, tomato jam, and fermented soybean salsa. The guy loves tomato water, and he's using that as the stock in a lot of his cooking. Dry aged crudo with black lime ponzu. I mean, this is really fine pointed plating for a lot of this cooking. And I just loved the way he did fresh pastas as well. So he did an agnolotti with Dungeness crab. You're going to hear Dungeness crab mentioned quite a few times in this conversation with saffron.
I would expect nothing less, honestly.
I mean, it was not during the season. So that's the problem that I encountered. It was not during Dungy season fully, so I didn't fully get it was more of a spring season, but I had plenty of halibut and other fish, and I'll be getting to that. So the best bite there, foie gras, I'm give or take, but his with ponzu gelée and sea buckthorn berries, the actual berries, not just the juice, stunning color. Really fine place, the Courtney Room. I think if this was, in New York, it's one of our top, 10, 20 restaurants. It's really a beautiful place. I loved it.
Okay, what's next on the list?
Let's keep going. All right, I got a couple. I would say the format's slightly different. I was on the hunt for coffee, and I'll talk about coffee later in the episode. But I kind of got the tea bug there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unexpected for you.
Unexpected for me. Canada is part of the British Commonwealth, and tea culture, particularly on the West Coast, is strong. And you find British influence in the cooking, in the architecture, deep history. And Murchie's Tea House is a place that had been recommended. It's a 125-year-old institution. Love the way they're doing scones and sandwiches. But adjacent to the cafe is this beautiful store selling teas from all over the world. and great for gifting, but also just like cool to walk around and see like a real British style tea shop, which you don't see them. You see them in London, of course, but you don't see them in the States as much. So I love that. Next door, Monroe's Books, which is, I talked to some locals and I was like, what's a great bookstore? And of course they said Monroe's. And it's co-founded by Nobel winning Canadian author Alice Munro. It has that real throwback indie vibe, like 90s style bookstore. Greenlight has it in New York. Like there's definitely like New York shops like it, but I just love handwritten recommendations in a bookstore throughout the store.
The little blurb from the staff calling out their favorite books, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I love those. Also, this sounds like the coziest shop street if there is the beautiful tea store and then the bookstore on the same block.
You nailed it, Liza. I'm trying to paint the picture. I think I'm doing my job.
I'm sold.
Yeah.
I would be there all day.
It's such a great spot. And lots of great Canadian cookbooks, authors I was not familiar with, and really showing Canada's great cookbook publishing. I picked up a book, The Waitress Was New, a slim novella that was French in translation. And I just think that seeing recommendations like that in this cozy store, really, really love Monroe's Books. I have more to talk about.
Okay, I'm interested. Keep going.
I have more to talk about. My friend Ayel had recommended Hank's, and I almost didn't make it, but we slid in right like as they were opening before another meal, as you would when reporting on a city. And Hank's is, a beloved, I would call it, they're like, I don't give a fuck kind of vibe. They're more of a bar. And really, I would say they are doing burger night on Thursdays and Fridays, which we encountered. And they did a burger with halloumi. It was like just the cheese on a bun with pickled onions, and I really liked it.
So there's no meat.
No meat.
Just cheese.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like. I don't know why it's throwing me for a loop.
No. It was...
I could see it being good. Is it like griddled? Is the cheese warm at all?
Totally. It's warm and it had lemon in it, so it was like kind of like the Greek style cheese.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Like I really liked the vibe. I'm not sure. Are you a Twilight? Were you a Twilight fan, reader, listener?
Oh, you mean the
films?
The book film empire?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say not aggressively, but I was of the age in which it was happening, so I have seen the movies and I do quote them with my friends.
Oh, you do? So the cocktails are themed after Twilight. And I believe Twilight was filmed in Victoria. Lots of filming in Victoria. It's a popular destination. This is the kind of killer. Bella was the name of a cocktail with sherry, cherries, and mezcal.
Every cocktail is named after
many
like,
of them.
Twilight
Maybe not
reference.
everyone, but like Tamar picked it up right away. I'm unfamiliar with the Twilight series.
You have some homework, I guess.
I know. I was like, this is cool. And she was like right away, like, this is rad. So I like this place, Hank's. I didn't get to have a full meal there, so the jury's still out, but I like this meal. It's good.
Okay.
So moving on, I wanted to do some non-food. Of course, I went to the bookstore, but Bouchard Gardens. Have you heard of this name at all? Do you know that name?
It is ringing a bell for me.
In Victoria, and like when I said I was going, I had family and I was kind of doing my research, like poking around. Everyone's like, go to the gardens. Now, when you go to the gardens in February, there are no gardens. So we had a beautiful tour, wonderful staff there gave us a tour, and we walked the grounds and we could get a sense of the way the garden is laid out, and really just beautiful in the winter to seeing these old cedars and these beautiful redwoods just like amongst these gardens. And there's all sorts of styles. There's a sunken garden, a rose garden with hundreds of varieties of roses, Japanese garden. They do fireworks every weekend there. I need to go back during the summertime. Seems like a must in Victoria. But there is a food element there that I got to experience.
Okay, I'm picturing like mulled wine or cider or something. Am I on track?
They had that in one. Yes, you're on track for one of the dining rooms does, cocktails and warm drinks, hot toddies as you call them.
Yes.
We got to actually enjoy something that you can book ahead, which I really recommend. It's high tea in the British style. And I really liked the way they did the service. Canterbury Teas does all the teas there. And I just really liked the dishes, lots of like little sandwiches with like, they had a wild British Columbia smoked salmon, rillette, with chives in the middle of a croissant. They had grabiche egg salad with Dijon and Cornichon. And then they had a bunch of sweets, of course. So high tea, I'm really not like that aware of a formal high tea service, but it's like truly a meal. It's like having like lunch.
Mhm.
And then on the sweet side, carrot cake and some salted caramel mousse and just like really nice place. And I think if you're visiting Victoria, especially in the spring, summer, or fall, and you're going to see the gardens in bloom, book this ahead. Like a great tip, I think, is to have like this beautiful tea service. Really, really, really well done. Highly recommend.
I love this. Do you get to eat like triangle cut sandwiches with the crusts cut off?
You know it.
Okay.
You're visioning
As
it.
one should.
On multiple layers.
Tiers.
Tiers, they call that, tiers. So they had like, the sweets tier and the sandwich tier and really, really fun. Like, I love the room. It's like flooded with light and, the gardens, I'm sure in the, in the full bloom is beautiful. So
How lovely.
Bouchard Garden, gotta go there. We're linking to all of these spots in the show notes. But as an aside, I got to meet with Isabel Chung, and she's taking over the kitchen at Fairmont Empress. And I don't have too many details. She told me some off-the-record things that I can't really say. But, Isabel has worked for 25 years in Hawaii and parts of Canada and is such a talent. I read up on Isabel's career, and I just have to say we had a great chat at the Fairmont Empress. So check that out. Well, Liza, those were a few of my recommendations. I have more to come. But for now, enjoy this interview with Lori Joyce. Lori Joyce, welcome to This Is Taste. It's really great to connect with you.
This is awesome. Thanks, Matt.
So I was in your shop, Better Acres in Victoria, and, we had a great time. You tasted me through a bunch of your flavors, but I found out about your story, and it's like really remarkable. And we're going to get into it. And you've got so many cool things going on. But I want to first, just from the jump, what's up with Better Acres? I know it's a newer business. What are you doing there?
Oh, I'm making the world's best ice cream. Didn't you experience that?
I love how you said that to me when we were scooping or picking our scoops. You're like, this is the world's best ice cream, and I'm like, well, I've had some ice cream in my day. I will be the judge. Yes, Lori, truly amazing ice cream. You're really making something special. So I agree.
You were just as impressive. You are very technical with your knowledge on ice cream.
You're being kind. I mean, I guess I've had some scoops.
No, it's nice to talk to someone that appreciates actually what I'm doing, like really understands how, you understood how unstable the base is and how valuable that is. You got that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely part of this job. I twist my arm to try some ice cream and talk about it. But for real, like, you really do have incredible ice cream that has this texture that is hard to do, and flavor profiles and flavors that speak to me. And we were talking a lot about pistachio because that's a tough one to do and do it right. And I really love yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, ice cream's funny that way, right? Because everyone enjoys ice cream, but everyone has a different standard of ice cream. Most people just think ice cream is ice cream. And to me, that's like saying bread is bread. It's just not the same. So when I meet someone that is as passionate about quality, like real whole ingredients, I mean, we'll be friends for life.
Yeah, and let's talk about the ice cream itself. You're using dairy from British Columbia, and you're really about the farm. You grew up on a farm, and you had gardens in your life, and really talk about how you think about these flavors.
Well, I hope you felt this when you came into the shop, because I really wanted the shop to feel like you were in my farmhouse. I want everyone that comes into the shop to feel like they're walking into my home. I want them to feel the heritage. I want them to feel like truly my upbringing. And so growing up on a farm in Victoria, born and raised, my first dairy source was my own cow, like literally for the first 10 years of my life. And I really understood how important and the quality of that was when we no longer had her. There's a very big difference.
Yeah, and how do you take that ethic and do it at scale and make it, doing all of these hundreds of gallons a week? How are you able to do that?
Well, it's actually really easy to make good ice cream. It's people find that so confusing, but it's always like, mass produced product in general is, it's always modified, or it's always filled with cheaper ingredients for margins. And So initially when I started, I took the knowledge of my upbringing, really understanding cream and full fat, and as well as I do, the value of a high butterfat percentage. And that's why this all started. Like, let me tell you, when my two boys, and I think a lot of kids, ice cream's probably one of their first food experiences. And I was the mom shopping in the grocery store, buying ice cream, and because of my upbringing and because I was already in the food business, to me, I was really surprised and really very much disappointed when I discovered that what I thought was ice cream was actually called frozen dessert. I really, that's how and why this all started. I was just like, wow, this is not even called ice cream. Why is that? I didn't understand that there's actually a percentage difference of what can be considered ice cream, which is, more than 10% butterfat versus frozen dessert, which is less than 10%. So because of my upbringing on the farm, which was so important to me, it was like ingrained in me. It was my normal. It just seemed pretty obvious to me that there was an opportunity to make a better ice cream product. So, and let me be clear, I'm not making thousands of gallons a week or per day. We passionately make and source ingredients, and we make ice cream for our shop. And then now we're in grocery, and we use a co-man for that. And they just have to follow very diligently my recipe and source those same ingredients.
Great thoughts there about the difference in quality, and I think we definitely look at ice cream in many different ways, and sometimes it's just whatever we can get. It's just what we're going to scoop on top of some pie. But then when you go into a shop and you have somebody who's really has a pastry background, is a pastry chef and doing great flavors, it's a different thing. And more people are paying more for ice cream because it's like a cronut. You're going. It's like it should be considered pastry, not just this throwaway dessert.
Well, firstly, Matt, I don't want to take credit where I shouldn't. I am not a pastry chef. Let's be clear.
Okay, we'll get into your background because there's a really sneaky thing about your background. But let's stick with ice cream now. But it's cupcake related. I want to know, like, when we're walking into Better Acres and we're there, like in the summertime, great time to visit Victoria. What is the selection? What's the menu looking like?
Well, I'm going to have to tone it down this summer, and we're going to have to stick to 12. And that's actually 12 flavors. And that's a situation that I'm dealing with right now because what 12 flavors are those going to be? Because it seems like everyone is so interested in, there's two different customers. They're the customers like yourself that appreciate the quality and the simplicity and the true indulgence of real quality ice cream. They're not looking for crazy inclusions and sprinkles. But then there's also, because of where we're located, this is a pedestrian only street. This is a street where sometimes there are 3 cruise ships in town at the same time. And there's literally thousands of people walking by the door all day. It's an incredible shopping situation and opportunity, not only for myself, but also for these people that, Victoria attracts people from all over the world. It's fascinating. And so how do I create a product that really every type of person is going to enjoy? And that's why I'm quite excited, because I get to do what I know. And I feel that because of my upbringing, which is a tremendous European influence, it seems like a lot of people right now, because we're living in a time where there appears to be this crazy uncertainty, instability. I think people just crave comfort. And for me, comfort is simple and quality. And so I'm choosing my favorite 12 flavors that really resonate with old world, a European kind of influence. Like, for example, my Rocky Road, remember? It's typical Rocky Road, but then I've added Amarena Cherry into it because it's my heritage. So it's a little different, but there's still that comfort there. And just doing the best of the classic flavors that these cruise ship people that are my parents' age, quickly it transcends them to their childhood, essentially. They're like, wow, this is yeah, this really tastes like fudgicles from the 80s kind of thing.
What about your strawberry? I think strawberry is one of those flavors where, you can take many directions. I think there's like obviously the Haagen-Dazs to many is the North Star. You may disagree. But how do you think about this flavor that, when you go to Victoria in the spring and summer, you've got strawberries there and you're using them?
Yeah, but there's this local farm called Gailey Strawberries, and they're right in season. This really was the definition of labor of love. We were buying flats and then hand washing them and literally soaking the strawberries overnight in our cream base. So it was strawberries and cream, and people were lining up, it seemed like, for days. And in the back, we had like 9 flats that we were hand washing. It was ridiculous. To be honest with you, Matt, I don't even know if I can pull that off this year. It was just so, because of course, then you have to like dehydrate them because 99% of a strawberry is water. And because our base doesn't have any gums in it, water is our enemy, right? So it was a very technical flavor to make.
Really, really cool that you can have some local strawberries when you're visiting. And I want to ask you about the flavor that is broken you, or a flavor that is your grail that you are pursuing that maybe in future months you'll be able to crack the code for.
That would be it's a secret. I don't want to say.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about it on here. You'll have to come. Okay, you know what?
You're going to do it? You're going to break some news? Why don't we just call it breaking news?
I'm going to just send it to you. Okay. And then you tell me first what you think.
All right. We'll keep it. You keep keeping it hush hush. I appreciate that.
Because it really is a farm thing.
Okay.
It's an unusual flavor.
Oh, man.
And
can you give us a hint?
We grow it here.
Okay, there you go.
and you know what was amazing is, and the customer was ready for it, which was super cool, is I was able to incorporate herbs from our garden, like just chop up herbs from our garden. Like when I did the dark chocolate sea salt with rosemary, like right from the farm. Did you try that when you were there?
I didn't try that one. No, I don't think I made that happen. Yeah.
We live in a bit of a microclimate here in Victoria. Like it's actually parallel to, parts of the Mediterranean. So there are things that we're now able to grow. And I do believe in climate change. And thanks to climate change, it offers more diversity. And it's really interesting. So like, for example, my parents have brought all of their knowledge from growing up in Croatia. So they're planting and they're growing a lot of European fruits that maybe in the 80s and 90s weren't that popular, but they're really popular today. And I'll be incorporating, or I have incorporated some of that stuff into the ice cream. Like, we'll do roasted fig from our figs. You saw the fruit stand in the shop. Well,
yeah, let me just say, like when you walk into the shop during season, it's a farm stand. You can buy produce at your store, which is cool for an ice cream shop. Really unique point of view there.
I like to say that I'm bringing the country into the city. And when I was building out the shop, I actually discovered that, because of course I live like 20 minutes from downtown, so I wasn't that familiar with the offerings down there, but I was like, wow, they're really, if I came off a cruise ship, the first thing that I would want would be something like local, like fresh fruit, ideally, something that really represented that local area. And I learned pretty quickly that you can't find that in downtown Victoria. Like the closest grocery store is like 5 blocks from where I am. And so I was like, wow, I'm going to put a fruit stand in here. And people loved it. They were like, wow, this was picked this morning from a farm 20 minutes away that I of course can't get to because we got to be back on the boat in 2 hours. And so that was great.
Tell me about the visitors to Victoria and why, as a local, the food scene is so unique. I mean, you talk about these boom times during the summer, but there's also like spring and fall, and like it's not all about the cruise element. I mean, I was there in the winter, so there was nobody really there, which was awesome for me, to be honest. But what's it like visiting Victoria, and why is this such a special place to visit for food?
Well, in the off season, especially because it's so mild here, like for example, on the farm today, I'm going to eat lunch after this phone call. And most of the stuff that I'm going to eat was picked out of the ground this morning. So what makes Victoria really unique is that we can grow and forage and hunt and fish all year round and feed our families. And, that's truly the reason why we did the store, is because when the pandemic came, my parents are older and they were really ready to sell. And, but then pandemic came and my dad realized that we didn't have to wait in line at the grocery store because our freezers were full of food. And that's when it truly was that full circle moment of, we have food security. This is how valuable this farm is like, we have one chestnut tree that's 30 years old and it will feed us all year round. And so, it was like, okay, how can we keep the farm, survive this, maintain it, afford it? And, that's why when you go to the shop, you can read through, on the walls, there's this, I tell the story as to why I did the store, right? It's a tribute to keeping the farm and thanking my parents for everything that they did. So I'm hoping it's going to be the way that we get to keep the farm and ultimately inherit the farm.
Very, very cool story, Lori. Thanks for sharing it. I think it's remarkable that, you got through the pandemic and, soon enough you opened up a shop right in the middle of downtown Victoria. And you're doing some scoops in the summertime, right? How many are you doing a day, do you think?
Well, easily almost 1,000. I mean,
That's
it was
incredible.
crazy.
Wow.
Like we didn't, so I, as you can imagine, I'm bootstrapping this, right? So we had to get open in time for summer for obvious reasons. And so when we opened the door, I couldn't afford signage for like I don't think I had signage up until like the end of September. And so this is an example of being at the right place at the right time, right? Like we just opened the doors, and I have this picture that I'm going to frame one day because it just represents what I just said, right? Like we opened the door and all of a sudden there was people in the door, right? It was amazing. And it really calmed me down because, it's like, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to get through this? And we did it. We did it, and immediately people connected with the product and loved it. And all day, every week, and so far every month, I get this, can I talk to you? Can I say something? And I'm like, I always feel like I'm in trouble for something.
Right.
And they're like, I travel a lot. Like, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people from all over the world that come to Victoria, which is, I didn't know that. And I find that fascinating. And I'm so thrilled to experience that. And these people are like, I like ice cream and I get ice cream everywhere I go. But this is truly, I think, the best ice cream I've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar feeling when I walked in. I try a lot of ice cream, as I mentioned, and when you try a special product and you get the story and you meet Lori, you meet you, it's like, holy cow, this is a really unique spot. I want to ask you, I know it's hard because you're local and you have a lot of opinions about restaurants, but I mean, I on this episode, I've shared many of my favorite experiences, but I was a mere tourist. I was just there, checking out the scene. But as a local, what are a couple, maybe 3 restaurants that you just really love that you think our listeners should visit?
We live 20 minutes from downtown Victoria. And if for people that have the opportunity to take an Uber or get on the bus, there's amazing restaurants that have been around a long time that are just outside of town. So still 20 minutes away. But they really do a very good job of representing what Victoria and Vancouver Island are all about. Deep Cove Chalet, which is in Deep Cove, which is closer to the airport, closer to the ferry. So it's actually not that inconvenient. And it's in an old house that's literally on the water, that is surrounded by gardens where they're growing their own vegetables and herbs that incorporate into the dishes. But it's a very humble home. Like, it makes you feel like you're going to your aunt and uncle's on a Sunday dinner every day of the week. And it's old school. There's a lot of British, influence here in Victoria. And so it really kind of gives you that vibe. It makes you feel like you're going into someone's home in the 70s. It's cozy, it's humble, it's very elegant. and understated. So Deep Cove Chalet would be a place that you'd celebrate special events. Recently opened, maybe a couple of years, maybe right after the pandemic as well. Situated right beside the ferry in a small hidden marina is Fox and Monocle. Super talented owner, operator, chef, also sourcing local ingredients, hyper seasonality on the menu, which is really important to me. I really understand that living on a farm, which you don't get in mainstream restaurants. Everything is made fresh. I mean, every time I go there, which is not that often, but the croissants are still warm. Like Matt, that's my standard.
Right. You gotta make sure it was baked that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like if I'm going into a place and the croissant is still warm, I'm going back there all the time. Like she does a phenomenal job. So Fox and Monocle is a good one. And then actually right downtown Victoria, like if you don't have the time and you got to stay on foot, there's some really good hidden gems like in Chinatown. And I don't know if you went to Hank's.
I did go to Hank's. I really liked my meal.
Did you really?
Yeah. I went to Hank's, of course.
Isn't that cool?
Cool
Like that
place.
whole, like real, again, like you kind of, I'm impressed, Matt, that you went there. Like who told you about that place?
I had a local or somebody who knew the area hit me to it. Yeah.
It's like, that's a local spot. Zombrie's also like very reliable, makes you feel like you're, hanging out with some crazy Italian family. And then what's incredible, what's happening now, because Victoria's changed a lot. Like, when I grew up here, Victoria was really boring. Like it was the town of the newlywed and the nearly dead. That was kind of the slogan.
Yeah.
And now it's very artistic, real celebration of culture. And so there's these really cool farm restaurants that are opening up, like up island, that, the vineyards and, like day trips, a lot of that. It's great.
I forgot, our co-host Aliza and I were going over some of my places, and I just remembered one I didn't mention, Le Petit Saigon.
That's the Vietnamese place.
You
right?
told me about that, Lori.
Yes.
I went on our last night, got to meet one of the owners who runs it with her mom.
Yep.
I forget her name, and I'm bummed I didn't share this with Aliza, but honestly, this bowl of pho, it really, really is special. I really, really like that bowl of pho. It's amazing.
I'm so happy to hear that you took me up on that. That place isn't there, don't you feel like you're in Vietnam? I mean, I've never been to Vietnam, but I feel like that's what it would feel like if you were
I've been to Vietnam, and honestly, that's a great call. I think the way it's the pho is served, and we had I had beef pho, and it was, I think the what I liked about it was the broth and the stock that is clearly the most important part of that meal. And I had a little joke where people, unfortunately, when they have pho, won't even taste the broth and will start dumping shit in it, and that's really offensive because this broth is it's like a consommé. It's a beautiful broth, and it's a little spot that you had recommended. So I'm sorry I forgot that you had recommended to me and a local did, and it really is worth. And I love the vibe inside. It felt really, really, really warm and cozy. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's so interesting about Victoria is that there is we have a very old Asian heritage here.
Yes, you do.
Right. And so that's a second generation family that owns it. They've been around a long time, like 20 plus years. They really cater to the locals. And, I discovered them when I was building out the shop. And unfortunately, I never got to eat there when we were building it out because they're working there all day. So by 8:00, they're like, sorry. No, they just kept on turning me down, which of course made me want to go there even more. But it's awesome. I'm thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a visit. Now, I want to just circle back to your career before you started an ice cream shop. And I read your bio, and if I wouldn't have met you, I probably would have been suspicious. But I know you. This seemed to be true. You co-founded the world's first cupcake bakery. You ended up starring on a reality TV show that was played in many countries, including in America, on Food Network. And so, like, your voice is here. Maybe folks maybe know you from your face, and we'll have an illustration of you up at the top, so they'll know Lori Joyce. But this is like a really interesting background.
You know what's so funny is because I only moved back here like during the pandemic, I've met new people and new friends, and I don't ever lead with that because it was obviously so long ago. But I met someone maybe 4 years ago, and because she asked me, she kind of started drilling me as to my background, and I ended up telling her, and she told me that she went home and Googled me because she thought I might be crazy. She was like, this girl told me that she used to have a TV show. My best friend and I, also from Victoria. So we grew up together, and as girlfriends, we always talked about starting a business together. And that didn't happen. We went our own ways. I went to university, and then this job brought us back together. And I was actually a sales rep at a local industrial odor control product, phenomenal product that took me back to New York. And I set up distribution there. This is in 2001. Having the time of my life. This is truly when I fell in love with New York. I just graduated university. I'm probably like early 20s. And right after setting up that distribution, I got called back to go because of September 11th. And they needed the product. And there I was, this little young Canadian girl working on site, setting up this incredible odor control product. And firemen would stand in front of this fan and they would just tell me, they'd thank me. Like I had a real positive impact with this product. I was changing their work environment. It was a fascinating, but very sobering experience. I'm sure you're a New Yorker, right? Like you remember?
Yeah. Really, really.
All of fall of 2001 and what it felt like. And so just to get a relief, I took Heather to Magnolia Bakery before it became, quote unquote, the world famous Magnolia Bakery. And they happened to have the cupcakes in the corner in this little table. And I think I mentioned this when I met you, but because of my very traditional European upbringing, I never wanted what my mom made. So my mom would labor over these, like this handmade, like she made her own phyllo pastry, like with the apples, because our first farm, we had like 500 apple trees. And so it was like this very decadent, fancy European dessert. And I just wanted Rice Krispie squares and cupcakes. Right. Like I was the kid trading prosciutto sandwiches in elementary school for PB&J. Like I really wanted to fit in. I think I was the only kid that English was a second language. My parents were very different. I'm the only one that lived on a farm. My parents had a very thick accent. Like there was all these things working. I felt it was working against me. And I just wanted to be this like little Canadian girl that fit in and have cupcakes and Rice Krispie squares. And my mom would never make any of that. Well, firstly, she didn't know how to, but she would never make it. She would never do that. So I was really excited because Magnolia was making these beautiful cupcakes and they were delicious. And I bought a box of 4. They came in an unmarked white box.
Oh, really? No branding even then? Wow.
No. This was literally September of 2001. And it was like, this is really, the only people that knew about Magnolia were people that lived in the village. And the only reason why I was in the village is because that I was staying with a friend also from Victoria who was living in the village. And in the cab ride back to work, as I had like 3 cupcakes, I think Heather maybe got a crumb. She was like, this is what we should do. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like neither one of us had worked in food. We'd worked in retail and in fashion and now this odor control company, but neither one of us knew how to bake. And I cut her, typical best friend reaction. I totally cut her down for it. I thought that was a ridiculous idea. And as things progressed, I worked, I set up this company for this incredible opportunity that fell through. And, months later back in Vancouver, because I was living in Vancouver at the time, I just realized that I had been doing such a good job working for someone else. Imagine what it would be doing it for myself. And there's this big for lease sign on this really cool strip in downtown Vancouver. And, I called Heather and I was like, let's do this. And, of course, then her response was, I thought you hated that idea. Like, you totally cut me down for that idea. And I just was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it. And 4 months later, so April 2002, we opened our doors. And that was the first one.
And it was only cupcakes, and that's like the big difference. And what's the response like in 2001 to a cupcake bakery?
When we were brainstorming the ideas to what it was going to look like and all that stuff. And keep in mind, similar times, right? Like, do you remember? It was all about comfort. Martha Stewart magazine, Valentine's Day issue of 2002 was cupcakes. They were what decided our brand identity. It was like the cover was pink and cream and chocolate brown. And I grabbed that magazine and I was like, that's like the quintessential shop. And the look that we were both attracted to. And, we were young. We were in our mid-20s. We'd never done this before. It was like there was no Google. There was no internet. It was like pick up the phone and start asking questions. And everyone thought we were crazy. Like it was such a dumb idea to everybody to open up a bakery and just have cupcakes. Never mind the fact that neither one of us knew how to bake cupcakes.
That's amazing. That little nugget right there. You actually didn't know how to make them. So you taught yourself?
We were inspired to make cupcakes for our boyfriends for Valentine's Day. And I guess the fashion experience was a huge influence because they looked amazing, but they were like bookends. They were rock hard. I wish we kept them because they'd still look exactly the same. That was the moment where we were like, we have the creative knowledge, but we are not bakers. And a good friend of mine gave me this book called E-Myth, which was a really important book to read at that time that pretty much indicated, like, if you want to grow a successful business, it's probably valuable not to be the pie baker. In that experience, in that book, the reference was a pie baker. How do you run the front of house and also manage the back of house? So Heather and I had an advantage because there was the two of us and we both had very different strengths. But and she definitely, absolutely, rolled up her sleeves in the kitchen way more than I did. But we knew that we had to hire a baker right from the beginning. And the doors opened, I think it was April 12th. And, because we were in a really populated, kind of very dense neighborhood, similar to the Village in, downtown New York, we had people coming in right away and a tremendous community there. And then corporately, there was this tremendous interest for us to do because cupcakes are really interesting. Like you can customize them pretty easily, right? So we were considered that cool little shop that could do, personal images and custom writing. And then we had this super cool customer that came in one day and was like, I'm getting married this summer. Can we do a tier of cupcakes? And the best thing that Heather and I had at that time is because we didn't know what we were doing, we were open-minded to a lot of ideas. And, it would have been really easy. And I think a lot of people do this because it's something that they haven't done or they don't know. They would just say no, right? Where Heather was like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's figure that out. And then we flooded the market with setting up cupcakes at weddings. And the thing that's amazing about cupcakes is I would be setting up at the most beautiful golf course by the university for 200, 300 people. And then in the same day, I'd be out an hour away into the suburb at a backyard barbecue, setting up 25 cupcakes, super diverse, super delicious and fun. And yeah, we just rode that. And it was a crazy experience, but we broke the 3 rules of business. And that's why we got a show. And this was I'll send you the link. This is the intro of our show. It was you don't go into business with your best friend. You don't go into a business you know nothing about, and you don't go into business without a business plan. And we broke those rules and kind of proved them all wrong.
And it made great TV, right? I mean, you were, what was the name of the show?
Cupcake Girls.
Right, Cupcake Girls. That's still online. Yeah, you can find it.
We weren't coming from the entertainment business, right? We weren't actors. So it was literally ad lib. And it was two girls that knew each other really well. We were best friends and we had this crazy dynamic, high energy, high intensity. And we were both like, wow. I mean, I obviously recognized the value of doing a show because we were beginning to franchise. So at that point, we had like 15 locations. And it was a great opportunity for the franchisees and, for us.
Lori, it's been really great hearing this story. I mean, it started with ice cream, then we got into cupcakes and your journey. And I cannot wait to visit again and try that strawberry ice cream. I'm going to do it.
Oh, next time you're going to come to the farm.
It's a date. Lori Joyce, thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
This was great. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And we're back, hearing more about Matt's big Victoria tour.
Well, I love these conversations with Andrea and Lori, and I couldn't leave this episode without a few more recommendations from Victoria. Really got to visit the place. So, Aliza, the Chinatown in Victoria is historical. There are alleys that hold boutiques, and there's a beautiful small museum that gives a history of Victoria's Chinatown. And I was able to go to one restaurant that I saw the sign. I'm like, I have to go in. I had done no research, but this sign had to be 75 years old, neon. Really, really cool place. The place is called Don Me's Seafood Restaurant. Totally your spot.
I love old neon anywhere. I feel like I am a moth to the neon flame. How was the food?
The food was great. It was a dim sum. Like, we were there on a Saturday afternoon.
Perfect.
And so carts, we had xiaolongbao and hargao and like really hot tea. And we were trying to like not fill up on everything. So we tried a few dishes. Really great staff. And it's 100 years old, this restaurant. Sticking in Chinatown next to Don Me's is a place that I spoke with two separate chefs. I'm like, where do you like to go? And I got really, really hip to this place, Mai's Nixtamal. It is a tortilla factory in the middle of Chinatown in Victoria. And oh my gosh, really terrific work. The chef's name is Israel Alvarez Molina, and he worked at Pujol in Mexico City for many years. And he moved to Canada and opened up this tortilla factory. And really, for me, I love a fresh tortilla off the assembly line, and he was doing it right there. I got to chat with him briefly, and really, really great. A couple of the tacos that I enjoyed was barbacoa, beef barbacoa, grilled napale quesadilla, and then of course, Aliza, tamales. Fresh tamales.
I'm on the menu right now
Yeah.
as soon as you mentioned this because I love that it's in the middle of Chinatown and this looks so good.
Yo, it was so good.
Did you eat tamales? What kind?
Of course. I think I had chicken tamale, Tinga. Yeah,
Mm.
I had a chicken tamale. Again, trying not to like fill up on everything. We're trying to do like a survey of the city. But I kind of a hidden gem. I did not get this name of this place in my prep before visiting. That's why you ask the questions to the chefs and the folks who know food where to go. And I just think if you're going to this beautiful museum and walking the alleys of Victoria's Chinatown, definitely stop by Mai's Nixtamal. It's a really great spot.
So fun.
Yeah.
Okay, where else should I go on the trip?
Well, I have, of course, a coffee recommendation.
Okay.
And, I had some coffee. I had some good coffee. I had some okay coffee, as you will on a visit. But the one place that really stuck out, because it is a shop that is a multi-roaster shop, meaning they are not roasting their own coffee, but they are selling coffee from throughout Canada. It's called Hey Happy. And yeah, they were really happy there. They were like really nice, like for real.
They were caffeinated and happy.
They were caffeinated and happy. Loved the layout. Got myself a pour over. Sat next door in the seating area. They brought me this beautiful tray, and it was beautifully served. And really, I enjoy learning about coffee from a shop by looking at their wall. And some of the roasters featured was Drum Roaster, September, Prodigal, and Subtext. Those are a few of the roasters represented there. I had a pour over. They had great, milk drinks and food as well. It was a really, really nice visit.
It sounds like a nice kind of cozy place to fuel up between all of the eating that you were doing.
Definitely agree. A couple more stops. Now, I had to really think about how am I going to talk about Victoria's seafood. And I was like, okay, I had it on some menus, but I was like, I need to go check out some boats. I need to actually see the boats that
You need to feel the salt air.
Yo, definitely. You're like you can see the seaplanes coming in. I haven't mentioned that you can actually take a seaplane from Seattle or from. Have you ever taken a seaplane?
No, but I would love to.
I'm the same way. I really wanted to. Tamara was not so into the seaplane idea. I respect that. They're kind of small and they land on water.
Yeah.
But back to the boats, I got to go to the harbor and I got a wonderful tour of this remarkable, I would call it a fishing company that also is a restaurant that also does mail order, and it's called Finest at Sea. Really, really, really cool. So the story is really interesting. It was founded by a guy named Bob Fromeni. And Captain Bob, his name is Captain Bob, of course.
Captain Bob.
Captain Bob started out with one boat. He was a fisherman. One boat led to two, led to more. He now has 10 boats, and they're all going out throughout the year, but there's definitely high seasons where they're fishing many different species. And really, when you go to Finest at Sea, they have a food truck. And I would say as a visit, you can definitely get like fish and chips, but not like just cod, which we're used to in the States. But they're doing sockeye and they're doing halibut, and it's fried really, really well. You can also get a plate of smoked fish. So like lots of different styles of sable and salmon, all smoked there. And I just love Bob's story. You know, he's the kind of guy who will, leave Victoria for 3 months and go fishing for 3 months. That's how it works.
I love getting seafood from people who know it that well also. Also from anyone named Captain. Instantly I'm in.
Yeah, Captain Bob seemed like a character. And really, Finest at Sea is a place that you can definitely buy retail, but I think going there and visiting and having some fish and chips is a must visit.
Fish and chips when in Canada for sure.
Yeah, in Canada. You think about the UK as fish and chips, but Canada's got a great fish and chips culture for sure.
Commonwealth, yeah.
Yeah, the Commonwealth. And speaking of that, my final destination is not a food destination. I'm a fan of the show The Crown, so I'm a little bit like royal pilled at times. I just like the ceremony, and the last season was not my favorite, but ultimately what a great show. So I'm always thinking like, what's it like to be a royal? Like, what's it like to be in those shoes? I'm not saying that I got to meet a royal. I'm not like I didn't have that kind of access, but I did get a tour of the government house.
What happens at the government house?
Right. The name is like the government house. It's like, what is the government house? Okay, I had a real education on this tour, and it was a cool tour, and you can reserve them ahead of time. They only do them on Saturdays. And the government house is the residence of the lieutenant governor of British Columbia. So it's kind of like a ceremonial house. So the lieutenant governor is like the connection to the crown, is like the connection to the Commonwealth. So this is the side of Canada that is represented by England. And when you enter the government house, you're of course greeted by a portrait of Queen Elizabeth and King Charles. And we got a tour and we walked through this giant ballroom where they do ceremonies for like terms of service. Like if you've worked for the Canadian government or the crown for 25 years, you get a medal. But we got this great tour, and I would say in the summertime, they have a 15-acre garden. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Even in the wintertime, just walking around the grounds. Beautiful spot. Cool neighborhood. There's a castle as well that, is a few minutes walk away. That has a long history. But we went to the basement of the government house.
Spooky.
And yeah, spooky for sure. And I don't, if those walls could talk, I don't want to, I really want to be listening. But they had this billiards table that was like massive, and they actually let everyone go into the women's room, and it was like designed exactly like 1958. Like all the wallpaper.
Like couches to recline on.
Of course,
yeah.
Couches and powdering,
I love a bathroom with a couch in it. That's always like,
completely.
I'm going to be late coming back to dinner. I'm going to be hanging out.
Hanging on the couch. And just the wallpaper too was incredible. I mean, it's so well preserved. And I think if you're not Canadian, you're just visiting Victoria and you've had all this great food, you want to do something, you go to Bouchard Garden, but then get it to the government house. It's just like a cool history lesson about, the way the special relationship between Canada and England and the Commonwealth, and just seeing some really cool furniture. Like, yeah, please sign me up.
I'm glad that you had your royal moment, Matt.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
It was a royal moment. And thanks for letting me talk about my trip to Victoria. I love this place. I definitely can't wait to visit again. And I hope you enjoyed this special episode. This is Taste is hosted and produced by Aliza Barbanal and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.